Hello, this is Eastern Europe Review, a joint production of BELSAT and TVP World with reports and analysis from Ukraine, Belarus and Russia. My name is Alexandra Shapalina and these are the main stories. The Russian aircraft Sukhoi Superjet is dangerous to fly, yet there is no alternative for Russians.
No emergency exits on the wing, no additional emergency exit points. That's why 41 people died in that accident at Sheremetyevo.
A Catholic priest is being tried for treason in Belarus.
The regime doesn't like such indomitable people the most and tries hardest to break them.
As the Russian army tries to advance, Ukrainians continue to resist.
There's no mobile connection, nothing. The electricity has been off for 3 months, and this is the fourth. No water.
The investigative committee of Russia has initiated a criminal case into the crash of a Russian passenger plane that caught fire while landing at Antalya airport. The case was opened on charges of breaching safety regulations. The plane has been considered dangerous for several years now, and many Russians are afraid to board it, but there is no alternative.
This is how frightened passengers disembarked from the Azimuth Airlines flight from Sochi to Antalya after the Sukhoi Superjet 100 caught fire right on the runway. There were 89 passengers on board the Superjet. They were unable to exit the burning plane immediately. The cabin was already filled with smoke, and the flight attendants appeared confused during the emergency.
Our plane got fired during landing. We were flying to Antalya from Sochi. There was nowhere to breathe. Everything was filled with smoke.
Thanks to the prompt work of the Turkish special services, no one was injured during the fire. Comments from several passengers on the flight to Antalya began appearing online. According to them, the problem might have occurred under the left wing. Photos also show that it was pierced by the landing gear structure, damaging the fuel tanks.
At some point it felt like we were landing on the left wing. Then we stopped very quickly. When the left side caught fire and flames became visible, naturally that was it. I remembered what happened to the Aeroflot Sukhoi Superjet when the whole plane caught fire.
The accident recalled by the passenger in Antalya occurred at Sheremetyevo in 2019, where 41 passengers died when the plane caught fire during landing. The pilot, identified as the main culprit of the disaster, was sentenced to 6 years in prison. However, he claimed in court that the plane had a design flaw, as during a hard landing, the landing gear can puncture the wing and fuel tanks.
The landing gear struts puncture the fuel tanks. Well, that's how the Superjet is made. The fuel tanks are punctured and aviation fuel, kerosene, starts leaking out.
According to experts, the problems with the Russian aircraft were evident from the very beginning, as the Sukhoi Design Bureau lacked experience in developing civilian aircraft. An aircraft designer who began his career assembling the MiG-29 and later worked at the renowned II Design Bureau describes the Superjet as a dangerous aircraft, not only for passengers but also for pilots.
I learned to fly on a plane with a stick, and it's very difficult to control it precisely. With a joystick, I'd be completely confused. And when the autopilot was disconnected, they were unable to land the plane manually. They hit the runway. No emergency exits on the wing, no additional emergency exit points. That's why 41 people died in that accident at Sheremetyevo. They simply didn't have enough emergency exits.
After the shocking disaster at Sheremetyevo, Russian airlines have continued to operate Superjets. Since then, there has been more than one accident.
The design of the landing gear to center section joint, which is completely inconsistent with airworthiness standards and leads to the fuel tanks being destroyed and kerosene leakage during rough landings, was already obvious after fuel leaked from a Superjet carrying passengers when it hit a concrete joint in Yakutsk.
According to Russian independent journalists, the Superjet that caught fire in Antalya has been involved in 15 emergency incidents over the past 3.5 years. The Russian authorities had a plan to produce 40 civil aircraft by the end of 2024, but only 3 have been produced. Mass production of Russian aircraft is now simply impossible as there are not enough components. In particular, problem is with aircraft engines that are not produced in Russia, since sanctions prevent Western-made engines from being supplied to Russia. That is why the Russians have no choice but to fly with what they have.
The trial of Catholic priest Genrikh Aklatovich has begun in Minsk. Allegedly, he is being tried for treason. This is one of many examples of open, large-scale repression against the Catholic Church that the Lukashenko regime began in 2020.
Full-scale political repression in Belarus has not spared even members of the clergy. This week, the trial of a political prisoner, Genrikh Aklatovich, a 64-year-old Catholic priest, has begun in Minsk. He is accused of treason and causing damage to the state, amounting to approximately €1 million. The priest faces up to 15 years in prison.
Father Aklatovich is known for helping children from boarding schools. This has been his area of focus, helping children in vulnerable situations. He's known for this work even outside of Belarus.
The trial was held 300 meters from the famous Red Church in Minsk. Back in 2020, Lukashenko's officials suddenly accused the church of owing more than €60,000 in unpaid taxes to the city authorities. In 2022, a minor fire broke out in the church under suspicious circumstances. The regime used this to no longer allow priests or believers into the church, which is symbolic for Belarusian Catholics. Lukashenko's regime has turned against the Catholic Church partly due to the fact that its representatives condemned violence during the mass protests of 2020. This year, Andrzej Juchniewicz, the priest of the Shumilinsky Sanctuary of Our Lady of Fatima, was imprisoned. He has openly condemned violence and repression in Belarus. A criminal case has been opened against him, but the specific charges remain unknown.
He immediately took a position of resistance, moral resistance above all. The regime doesn't like such indomitable people the most and tries hardest to break them.
Among the priests and religious figures who have become political prisoners in Belarus are also an Orthodox priest, Serhiy Rizanovich, a catechism teacher, Uladislaw Beladzied, and an evangelical Baptist pastor, Mykolai Kryla. The persecution of priests, also under administrative charges, has been on the rise since 2020. Human rights activists are aware of at least 11 cases of administrative persecution this year alone. Most often, priests are detained for disturbing so-called extremist materials. In July this year, an updated version of the law on freedom of conscience and religious organizations has come into force. All religious organizations are required to re-register and are prohibited from engaging in political activity. The law defines broad grounds for the suspension and dissolution of religious organizations. In Baranovichi, Catholics were denied permission to hold the traditional Stations of the Cross without any explanation. In Malarita, the christening of 10 people was recognized as a so-called unauthorized mass event. A Baptist pastor, Vladimir Burshtin, was convicted in early November and fined for this. In the summer, the authorities blocked the Catholic information resource Catholic.life.
You can't move a church. Not all believers are ready to leave the country, so the church adapts to the conditions in which it operates. That's why the modern Belarusian church is quiet, silent, in the shadows. But its position was expressed a few years ago.
the chief official overseeing religious affairs in Belarus, Alexander Rumak, has openly warned that politically disloyal communities will not be re-registered.
For over a month, the units of Ukrainian army have been holding the front line near the villages of Lysivka, Mykolaiivka and Hrodivka in the Donetsk region. The analytical portal Deep State shows that the Russian units were stopped on the access roads to Pokrovsk and Mirnograd.
What did the president of Ukraine say when he came to Pokrovsk? We won't give up Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. See? Why should I believe anyone and not the president?
This is how Ihor, a resident of Mirnograd, responds to a policeman's suggestion to evacuate. Fighting is taking place on the outskirts of the town. The Ukrainian military is erecting spiral barbed wire barriers, digging trenches and anti-tank ditches, and mining the access roads and entrances to Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. Ihor assures us that there is no danger. His neighbor Alexander, however, reports daily raids from Russia. 2 houses he lived in over the past several months have been destroyed.
It's already happened twice. I've moved to a 3rd house. I used to live on Furman Street. The shelling happened on the 22nd of August. A neighbor gave me the key to his house. Another strike. I moved houses. I had concussion.
According to local authorities, civilians in Mirnograd are most often killed by Russian artillery strikes and FPV.
There's no mobile connection, nothing. The electricity has been off for 3 months, and this is the 4th. No water. Well, there is an artesian well. There's also another well in the area, but they've already placed mines around it, making it nearly impossible to access the water. Also, there are no young people or children left. The population is mostly made up of people who are 50 and over.
According to the city council, only about 10 shops are serving the entire city. All the pharmacies are closed and there is no ambulance service. Most residents are either hiding in basements or remaining in their homes.
Planes are constantly bombing the city. FPV drones are flying, hitting civilian cars and houses. We can see that even though there is no military here, the enemy is targeting civilians.
The center of Mirnograd has been almost completely destroyed by aerial bombardment. In late summer of 2024, our film crew witnessed one such strike. On the 17th of August, the Russian Air Force dropped an aerial bomb on a 9-story building. Despite the airstrikes, cars continued to drive around town. Cafes and grocery stores remained open, and Mirnograd's residents went to work. This autumn, in just 3 months, Mirnograd has become deserted. Thousands of residents have fled. In one yard in the center of town, we encountered a man collecting nuts near a massive crater left by an aerial bomb explosion.
How are you doing? I collect nuts. What can I do? We have to survive. Some eat sweets and cakes, but do we have that here? No, I eat nuts.
It is no longer possible to document the destruction in the town, as nearly all the houses have been partially or completely destroyed. Even public services are no longer responding to calls to clear rubble caused by the strikes, and only military and police vehicles are driving through the town. Having failed in their attempts at a frontal assault on Mirnograd, the Russian army has concentrated its attack to the southwest of Pokrovsk towards Zhovte, Shevchenko, and Novotroitske. If these villages are captured and the offensive continues north, the satellite towns could be in danger of being semi-encircled.
That's all for today. Thank you for watching Eastern Europe Review. We will be back next week with our new reports. I'm Alexandra Shapalina. Keep watching TVP World and see you next time.